I've always been a big fan of fantasy games, ones where I'm the hero, saving a damsel in distress, or vanquishing the darkness with my unbelievable heroic inner light. Whether they were action-oriented, JRPGs, dungeon crawlers, or even text-based adventure games, I love them and they set a lot of extremely unreasonable expectations. A lot of my early experiences with fantasy games were presented on an 8-bit stage, so in many cases my imagination had to do most of the work. There were, however, some really amazing titles that stood out despite their fairly limited color palettes. One of these games was Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap on the Sega Master System. Now, before I get into the details of the game, let me first state that I was a Nintendo kid and didn't own a Master System until many years later. I did have some friends that owned a Sega, but sadly they moved away before I had the chance to convince them to get all the games I was going to miss out on. So, out of desperation and necessity, I befriended the fat, rich kid who reeked of BO and cat piss. His whole house reeked of cat piss and shit. And, well, I like to forget about that and move on. Let's just say I really liked video games, and sometimes you have to deal with some excrement in order to experience greatness. Wonder Boy 3: The Dragon's Trap is a side-scrolling fantasy action game that was developed by Westone and published by Sega in 1989, and was generally regarded as one of the best games released during the 8-bit era of gaming. Like most games being localized to North America around that time, the name Sega chose for it was a little misleading for marketing and brand recognition reasons, as it was originally released as Monster World 2 in Japan. It was later ported to the Game Gear in 1992, however Hudson Soft also did a port to the TurboGrafx, which was called Adventure Island in Japan, and Dragon's Curse in North America. It also featured redone sprites. Dragon's Trap starts you at the end of Wonder Boy in Monsterland and follows the same protagonist, even though his hair went from blonde to green. Anyway, after defeating the Meka-Dragon, our hero is transformed by a curse into a lizard man. More like a dragon, man! And must set out on a quest to obtain the Salamander Cross in order to break the spell. There really isn't much narrative in the game other than a few screens of text that give you a vague idea of the events to come after completing the introduction, but it does manage to give you just enough information so you can make sense of what's happening. For once, the objective isn't trying to save anyone, rather than trying to remove a curse that directly affects the way your character plays. Now, this was something very different, and it set it apart from other games of the time. Since the term Metroidvania hadn't yet been coined, there were very few games out there at the time that really shared the same kind of flow and necessity to backtrack, especially on the Master System. Sure, you can crouch, move left and right, you have a jump button and an attack button, like most other games. But where the game really shines is the different abilities you get and how the world opens up after acquiring new forms. Forms, you say? Oh yeah, I guess I better go over that. As you progress through the game, you will defeat other dragons, which will then alter your curse and grant you other forms that have their own perks and weaknesses. Early on, you aren't able to switch forms, however, you will eventually gain access to rooms with a platform that will allow you to switch just by jumping on it. Here's a brief overview of the different forms you'll acquire on your journey. Human. The game starts you off as human, which is pretty straightforward. You can jump and attack with your sword, no major weaknesses and no specific abilities or perks either. Once you are cursed, you will not be able to play as human again, so this form is pretty short-lived. Lizard Man. After getting cursed, you become a lizard man. Instead of using a sword, you can breathe fire, which has the best range of all weapons. Lizard Man is the only form that cannot block projectiles with a shield. However, it does not suffer damage from lava. Mouse Man. Mouse Man has the ability to climb checkered walls and does not need to crouch, as he is fairly small and can fit through narrow spaces. He also has the shortest reach for sword attacks, but has no major weaknesses. Piranha Man. Piranha Man is able to swim freely underwater and gets significant defense boost when he's equipped with the Aqua Shield. He has no major weaknesses. Lion Man. Lion Man lacks the ability to crouch, but makes up for it with the way that his sword attacks arc in front of him. Lion Man is proficient with the Murmaza Blade and will do more damage with it than the other forms. He also has no major weaknesses. Hawkman. Hawkman possesses the ability of flight and will get a boost to defense when equipped with the Heavenly Shield. While Hawkman can fly, he can't go in the water without taking damage. On top of your forms, there are utility items and spells which may help with defeating specific types of enemies. These include boomerangs, fireballs, lightning bolts, arrows, and tornadoes. You can also get weapons and armor which will boost your attack and defense, some of which have special properties based on what form you're using. One of the few minor gripes I have about this game is that the pause button is on the system. So in order to access your inventory, you're going to be getting real familiar with it. Different armors and weapons will become available at some shopkeepers based on how high your charm is. Your armor also has an effect on how high your charm is, and in some cases will even decrease your charm. Don't worry though, you can also acquire charm stones from chests or enemies which permanently increase your charm. There are also heart containers which can be obtained from chests which will increase your life bar by 1 whole heart. There are 8 in total. If you happen to lose all your life, you will die and be treated to a little mini game where you have the chance of winning a life potion which can restore some health if you should perish. After your mini game, you're placed back in town with all of your gold, charm stones, weapons, and armor intact at the cost of losing all your special items. There are also keys that may be needed in different situations. Some are found off enemies, some in chests, and later you can obtain them from one particular shop. As I mentioned before, there aren't really a lot of opportunities for dialogue in the game. You can really only talk to 3 types of people. Shopkeepers, who may not even sell you their wares unless they find you charming enough. The nurse, who will refill your hearts at a cost, which goes up for every extra heart you acquire. And most importantly, there's the guy with the hut who gives you your password. That's right, password saves. It would have been amazing had this game had battery backup, but this was only found in very few Sega Master System games. Luckily, the passwords are pretty straightforward, unlike some of the other games of that generation. Let's talk a little bit about the graphics. One of the most appealing things about this game is the way it's presented. The characters are full of life and charm with their fairly large sprites, cartoony look and expressive animations. As a kid, I spent hours drawing each of the different forms, the enemies, and the bosses. They all seem to have that timeless appeal to them. The level design is pretty awesome as well. The different areas you'll venture to have their own unique themes, varying from the sunny beach, to the arid desert, haunted forest, and the rocky underground, to name a few. Not only do they set the stage, but really help immerse you in this amazing 8-bit world Westone created. All of the graphics in the game are very colorful and pop out at you, grabbing your attention and leaving an impression long after you stop playing. Sound-wise, this game is on par with the graphics. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this has the best music I have heard on the Master System. Each location has its own theme, which perfectly sets the mood for its respective area, and it really draws you into the world. Over the years, I've found myself humming many of these melodies as they seem to be a permanent resident in my subconscious. Now, unlike many 8-bit games, the sound effects are pretty decent, never really grate on you, which is kind of nice. Seems like Westone had the magical touch when it came to this title. Well, to be fair, it seems a lot of their games have that quality, but this one even more so. I find that while we all tend to remember how amazing a game is, we sometimes forget the amazing staff behind the game. Without listing their entire resume, here are the key people responsible for this wonderful experience. Directing the game was Ryuichi Nishizawa, probably the most recognizable name when it comes to this series, as he was also the producer and programmer on Wonder Boy and Monsterland. Some of his other notable projects were Jaws for the NES, where he worked on graphics, Dungeon Explorer, where he was the director, and Dark Half, where he served as director and event script designer. In charge of sound composition was Shinichi Sakamoto, who was also responsible for the sound of Wonder Boy and Monsterland. He also aided Ryuichi Nishizawa on Dark Half as co-director. Programming duties were handled by Takanori Kurihara, who has also handled programming for Wonder Boy and Monsterland and Dungeon Explorer. Now, bringing these wonderful sprites to life was Hiromi Kurihara. She was also credited with design for Wonder Boy and Monster Land and is the co-director. So overall, is this game worth it? Absolutely. It's one of the best 8-bit games that's ever been created, and definitely one of the best for the Sega Master System. So if you can get it at a decent price, I absolutely recommend grabbing it. Hell, even if you can't get it at a decent price and you're collecting for the Master System, you should have this game.